10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hi.
Hi.
All
Sorry.
right. All right. We got you here. I can see you and hear you well. Can you see me and hear me well? I think the audio is a little bit soft.
Okay, can you hear me now?
It's still a little soft.
How about now?
Yeah.
Can you
It's
hear
a
me
little
now?
better. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you guys hear?
Is
If
that
someone can't hear, just shout out to us. Hi, Saloni and Anya. Okay. All right. Guys, without much ado, I'm going to just jump into introducing our star speaker for today. So we have Neera Nundy here, who is co-founder of Dasra. Dasra is an organization in the social enterprise space that she co-founded, believe it or not, in 1999. So congratulations, Neera, over 20 years of your journey. And I don't know how you're going to summarize 20 years in the next 45 minutes or so, but really looking forward to that. As most of you know, Neera has worked with several organizations in the development space and made a fundamental difference to many organizations like Magic Bus, Educate Girls, Sneha. And I'm going to leave it to her to describe her model in much more detail. She's also a fellow Harvard alumnus, and that's how we connected. And she's also been on several boards, including that of the American School of Business. And she's won many prestigious awards, including the Forbes Philanthropy Award in the crossover leader category. So, Neera, thrilled to have you here. Tons of credentials. Honestly, guys, beyond the fantastic CV and the amazing credentials, personally having known Neera for a few years, she's just an amazing individual. In addition to devoting her life to such a supreme cause, she's just a great personal mentor for me and really a female leader that I look up to for inspiration. So, Neera, this is actually a personal honor to have you on the show. So, thank you so
Oh,
much.
that's so kind. That's a crazy
I,
introduction. Live up to that.
you've already lived up to it, so I don't know where you're gonna go next. But so without much ado, Neera, first question over to you is
Sure.
as you know, we run an education and careers advisory, right? So my first question to all my guests is, always about their education. I ask them to flash back to their childhoods and give us a little sneak peek into your childhood, your early years. What was
Mm,
like early life like? What kind of kid were you?
Um, that's a great question. I think I was a slightly odd kid, but I thought I was really cool when I was growing up, and I thought there wasn't much to learn after I was 13. In retrospect, there's so much more to learn. So I grew up in Canada. That's why I have a slightly odd accent. So I was born and raised there. My parents moved as part of the brain drain. And my mother was the first electrical engineer from sort of IIT Kharagpur. And the reason I bring that up is we immigrated largely because my grandmother did her psychiatry residency in Canada. So I had pretty much very strong women from a science background. And I had no other choice growing up besides to do science or math. So I grew up in a very slightly traditional Indian middle class family, in the US and Canada, where education is like everything. And somehow that was going to solve everything for me. And so we all had to study, we all had to take school very seriously. I think for me, a turning point might have been boarding school. So my parents sent me off back to India when I was 10, under this whole pretense in retrospect that I would learn about my culture and be more balanced. And now that I have kids that are teenagers, I'm like, what a perfect age to send your kids away and not have to be there, frankly, raising them. Anyway, so long story short, I wanted to always follow the path. And I think that every little experience in life just shaped me in a different way. And I'm clearly not really on a traditional path now.
Okay, but the earlier years were traditional. You sort of went down the math, science, engineering route. And
Yeah,
had a
I mean,
pretty,
yeah. So I mean, I grew up with, at least at that time, it had so much to do with your grades. Like you had to at least do well in school to then have a bunch of doors open, and that seemed to just be hygiene. And I think it's even hygiene now. And I did a lot of activities. So I think over time, I now in retrospect recognize that it's all the different things that shape you that become interesting for people in terms of therefore how will you shape their organization or their institution should you, be a part of it.
okay. All right, great. So very traditional background, and I think a lot of us can connect with that sort of upbringing, having been raised here in India in a similar fashion. So what happened then? So how did Harvard happen? How did business school happen for you? Like, tell us that piece of the journey.
Yeah, sure. So, I was saying I grew up, whatever, and then I did my undergrad in math because I was like, oh, let me do
Wow.
something that higher marks in. So I studied math and statistical sciences, and what kind of profession do you have with math? I didn't know any profession other than actuarial science, which is
Actually,
like
right.
a really odd, slightly boring. You're like doing mortality tables and you work for insurance companies. But I was like, oh, at least I'll have a job. But it was actually in undergrad in my second year where my theory of interest professor was like, hey, you talk a lot, so you should think about this business class. And so I took this optional business course, and actually 60% of your grade was raising your hand and trying to say something that contributes to class. And I was like, whoa,
Sure.
this is way easier than all of the math. So I ended up doing business, and then I graduated with 2 degrees in business and in math, and came out in a super hot market. I had no idea that, so this was 97, that this was a hot market. And that's when the analyst program started in investment banking, and they were hiring sort of from undergrad. So I had a bunch of offers from a bunch of different investment banks, mainly because they were looking for people with a different kind of background. And so science, math, you had a few of us who were there, but a lot of the folks actually as analysts in investment banking, they came from these amazing schools, and all did liberal arts. So I came from this Canadian school that no one had really heard of, but I think it was everything else and maybe around it that, it became an opportunity. So I went to Morgan Stanley, I went to New York. I thought I was super cool at 22 in New York City and mergers and acquisitions. And really it was the grind, right? I mean, in those days we did 120 hours a week and
Right.
thought we were really cool. Should I keep going?
Yeah, yeah, please go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So then
Yeah.
investment banking has its own, I suppose, experience and learning, and retrospect, I think, built a lot of foundations. But it was really there where I started conversations, in my own head and thinking, hey, could I do something that was a little bit more meaningful than staying up late at night trying to fix PowerPoints? And that was at the same time that my mother actually moved back to India, and she started a boarding school for Adivasi children just on IIT Kharagpur campus. And I think through
Oh,
my life, having come back and forth for that, having, in my summer in college, I actually worked in Bombay, actually at an investment bank. So I think I had a connection to India. But anyway, I did
right.
investment banking. Everybody from investment banking goes to private equity or to business school. So I applied to business school, thinking that it opened and that you don't actually have to commit to a particular career per se. So I was like, hey, let me apply to Harvard. And then I got into HBS and I was like, oh my God, if they let me. And so I went to
Okay.
HBS. And then I think I came out, and that's really when I came out, really start something like.
Okay. So going into HPS, social
Vibha.
enterprise was not on your mind. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I mean, I think social enterprise was a part of my life, but not in a I'm going to make a career out of this. I didn't have that foresight, right? I was
Okay.
like, oh, it's good to help organizations. It's good to help my mom, but I also need to have a salary and a job. I didn't
Sure.
quite make that shift in my own mind with that opportunity probably till later.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, I think a lot of us connect with what you're saying. I had a similar trajectory. I was in New York working with BlackRock, and a lot of the students I work with, they go through a very similar sort of thought process. They're working in these consulting and tech and project management type of roles, and all yearning to make some sort of difference, but then not quite sure, what to do with it. And then obviously the big question for them is, how will I survive in a career in social enterprise, etc. So when did you make that sort of finite decision saying, I'm going to let go of my banking and finance background and sort of switch now full time to this sector?
So I think it was, I finished HBS and then joined, right? So I think there was something about that, the continuous sense of privilege, but not privilege of wealth, but privilege of exposure, privilege of education. Could I take whatever little experience I had and could I play a bridging role? And I kept asking myself, I don't have anything to lose, really. I mean, it was just myself. So why not give it a try? And I think the school does, and you probably know this, they do this like great job of brainwashing, that you're a leader that makes a difference in the world. And I started to believe that I should be a leader that makes a difference in the world. And so, connecting that to Dasra just became, I had more confidence and courage, I think, to do that. I wasn't born like I'm going to save the world kind of person at all.
Okay. So you were kind of like the rest of us. You sort of had this traditional Indian upbringing. You went down the math and science route. You did the whole math degree. You went to business school. You had the banking career. And then post HBS, you said, okay, I'm going to make this switch. So did having the MBA sort of make you feel more secure in the fact that, you could go do social enterprise and then for whatever reason, if you needed a stable income, you could always go back to like a corporate job?
Yeah, I mean, I always thought, well, someone will hire me. I did go to HBS. So I think that did give me, a sense of what could be, a fallback, for lack of a better word. But there's something else that it's not like you just switch, right? It's that you start to get exposed, you start to do smaller, and then I think you have a turning point, right? Where all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm really going to take this opportunity. But it also has a lot to do with everything around you that supports. Although I must say, my parents thought I was completely crazy. It's, even my mom
They
thought,
did.
what is
Oh,
wrong?
they
I
did think
remember
you
her
were crazy, huh?
pulling. Yeah. I mean, my mother, who came back to India to start her school, basically, I remember came to see me in New York and said, "Are you sure you want to do this? I mean, you went to Morgan Stanley, and now you're going to do this social thing. Deval must be making you do this." And of course, the whole blame went on to. So, yeah,
Wow.
I think that it's not easy to do that. I think it's hard for family when you're taking risks, no matter what.
And how did you think about sort of justifying the financial burden of going to business school? It sets you back a cool, I don't know, 100 to 150K depending on your situation. So
Yeah.
how did you think about that aspect about sort of paying back your loans?
So I think I was lucky. I was part of the Social Enterprise Fellowship Program. I was part of the Social Enterprise Loan Forgiveness. And I was actually on loan forgiveness for 15 years. I think the limit was about 10 or 12. And then Dean Noria and them agreed that I had made the least amount in the history of the school for that many years coming out, that I should just extend it. But it's like a mortgage, right? I think that to think about it as, creating the opportunity or the courage or whatever it might be, it's an investment, frankly.
Okay, so the school sort of relaxed your... Okay, yeah. So they relaxed your loan repayment period, and you're saying you paid your loan off over a period of 15 years. Okay, wow. That's probably the longest repayment cycle that the school's ever had.
I know. I don't know if that's embarrassing but it's like a mortgage, right? It's like your mortgage. Yeah. You're getting a house.
Okay, so tell us about Dasra. Let's move to Dasra. How did it start off? What was the original concept? How did you sort of envision it at the very beginning? And then we'll obviously transition into what it's evolved to now.
Sure. So Dasra is a Sanskrit word. It means enlightened giving, and this is our 21st year, so we've been doing it for like a really long time. We started with the simple idea of money, and we didn't do skills, right? We were around 24, 27, something like that. So we thought, what could we do? And we said, let's place ourselves, in the middle where we could support other nonprofits, basically be willing to do anything they needed help with. Like at that time, the big thing was help me with my website, my logo, write proposals. So it
really?
started with how do we simply help NGOs, and then it moved to we can actually influence the funding side. and more money and funding can go to very strong NGOs. So, and I think that's really how began that bridge. You know, it was a time when we started that this whole concept of venture philanthropy came about. There was sort of the VC movement, and it was like, can you take philanthropy and begin to fund emerging nonprofits and really help them scale with stronger management skills and funding? And that's really where we situated Dasra, you know, way back then.
So when you started, was it just you and your husband, or did you start out with a bigger team?
No, we started out with the two of us, but then we hired sort of 3-4 people, and we grew slowly. You know, it's hard organization. So it would be like you get a little bit of money and okay, let's hire a little more, and you get higher. You know, our biggest challenge was we lost a big chunk of our initial funding when we first started. And I think that was really hard because we raised money in a big boom. And then the internet bubble basically burst at that time. This is about 2000, 2001.
Right.
And I think with that, we became super risk averse, where we were like, if we're going to hire people, then we should have, you know, at least cash, which is very conservative. You know, in the bank to support people, because, you know, people were joining us on an aspiration of wanting to change the world, and you feel like they're compromising when they join in some way, that we need to be able to provide that stability. Anyway, we fast forward now, we're like a team of, you know, 104 people. We still have the challenges that their nonprofits have, but we're a lot more stable.
Wow, you have a team of 104 people now.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. It's amazing that you were able to attract, you know, this sort of talent to your sector, you know, because I have interacted with a lot of Dasra employees, and they're all just super happy to do what you do. Like they love the mission of the organization. So what do you think the secret is? Like, what do you think, you know, what are you doing right? What are you doing to attract these people? And I know you hire a lot of like these Ivy League graduates and, you know, like ex-Morgan Stanley, ex-banking type of people coming to you. So what is it? What do you think is working?
So, I mean, I must say that I do feel really proud of the kind of talent we have and what they are able to do with Dasra. I think that it's generational, Vibha. I mean, when I came out of HBS, barely anybody was coming to India and going into the nonprofit sector. But it's generational now. I think people who want to give back, you know, to be part of something that's enduring, and they want to make a difference and apply their skills. So I feel that we're a little bit more proximate to, I suppose, having the kind of education like a management degree, because we're supporting the ecosystem, right? And we're supporting the organizations. We're working with business leaders to try to think about how their giving can be more strategic. So I think we're able to maybe leverage skills a little bit easier. But, you know, the real hard work is happening on the ground, right? The front line, folks in the community. And I think there's something quite inspiring about being able to support them. I mean, when I first started, I dreamt about wanting to change the world. I was like, I will wear a khadi sari and I'm going to go and microfinance. And I went to Seva and I thought to myself, I am not the person that can mobilize women. I was so inspired by women who were part of the loan programs and entrepreneurs and, you know, lead and helping their families in the way that they were. But that wasn't my skill set. And there were people far better from the community to mobilize. So I think really thinking about where do you position yourself that you can make the most difference, right? I think that that takes time, but I think it's important to reflect on.
Okay, I think that's a very key point, because a lot of us are in situations where we say, oh, we want to give back, we want to do stuff, but I don't think we're able to sort of place ourselves in the value chain. You know, I think that's where you nailed it. You know, you figured out with your banking skills and with your husband's skills and with his NCR MBA and your Harvard MBA, you're able to sort of combine the best of what you have and really sort of plug a gap in the market. I think that's really where you guys sort of, you know, nailed it.
I think and I mean, for us, what we're actually really proud of is to see how business schools, even HBS, accepts, you know, folks who were fresh grads out of undergrad, came to Dasra, was the only professional experience they've had, and then have the opportunity to go to HBS, right? So I think there's something in the
Sure.
quite valuable about the need for, government, private sector, and civil society to come together. So you need different disciplines to be part of the change.
Okay. So I'd love to get into a little bit of specifics about what Dasra has actually done. So if
Sure.
you could tell us a bit about, how do you liaise with the larger companies and how do you sort of help them? And then how do you sort of channel that over to the grassroots level and, what sort of role you actually play in the whole system?
Yeah, sure, sure. So I think a big part of our work is how do we support, really great nonprofits, whether it's with the management skills or the funding. And then the other side of the same coin is less companies, but more business leaders, family businesses who, more and more see the need for giving back in some way and want to be strategic about that giving. And so we help shape, where they want to give, how they want to give, and we really try and link that immediately then to the nonprofits. But what's happening more and more is how do you help not the one-to-one, but how do you think about more in platforms? How do you think more in aggregate view? And also, how do you break silos? So it's not about can you just fund education and health. To actually empower an adolescent girl, we need to delay child marriage. We need to help her not get pregnant as a teenager, finish grade 10. And so you need different kinds of money, actually. And so we pool that and then support organizations who go into the community and directly work with girls in the community. And so it's a lot about identifying, it's a lot about working with leadership of the nonprofits, it's a lot about researching, we do due diligence. And I think more and more we're building what we call communities of practice. So like I was saying, sort of platforms is really where a lot of this work needs to go to. And also horizontal.
So are you saying you're sort of like a funnel? So you meet individuals who are sort of who are wealthy individuals who want to give back, and you sort of channelize that money to organizations that need that money, and you're sort of like the funnel that does that. To sort of oversimplify it. Okay.
Yeah. In the simplest sense, yes. But we spend a lot of our time actually pooling the funds and then giving a lot more funding to the organizations, and then spending time with these organizations so that they can grow, right? The more funding they have, as they build in their capabilities and capacities, then they can scale, and so their impact scales. So it's a combination of working with influencing philanthropy, and I think it's also because there's just more and more Indians who want to give, and there's more and more Indians who want to participate in this. And it's not just about wealth, right, Vibha? I know there's a young group probably listening, and you don't yet have a whole lot of wealth to give, but I think it's all kinds of resources. It's not just money. It's your intellect, it's your skills, it's just your hands, it's being able to have more hands on deck to support some of these orgs. And I think even right now at a time of COVID, more than anything else, we just really have to create a safety net for the most vulnerable who are just left outside of, government systems that are supposed to protect us all.
Okay, so since you're touching upon COVID, I'm going to pick a question up from Shreya Jain, who says, how has the pandemic affected Dasra's working? So, maybe talk specifically about, organizations that you're working with. What sort of difficulties are you seeing on the ground? And are you facing any difficulties in terms of fundraising now that the pandemic is hit? So just a little update on the current situation.
Yeah, I think we took a very quick decision for all of us to just get to work from home, because we're so privileged, right? We don't actually work directly in the communities. And so there was no need for us to, put the staff at risk. So we went very quickly into work from home. But if I just think about this sector is under stress. A lot of organizations don't have enough cash to take them out 6 to 8 months. And the reason that we know this is we quickly realized, let's help other organizations figure out through a financial stress test, how much cash, so long story short, there's a lot of stress. But I think one way to look at it positively, it has really created a lot more awareness, and everyday individuals want to be a part of this change and part of the solution, right? All the way from buildings having packages of food get delivered to, just helping out here and there. Retail giving's really increased. So just people even who have small paychecks willing to give a little bit, that adds up to make a difference. So I think as the sector is constrained with resources, the more we can all do to participate, right? With our skills, with volunteering, and just thinking about that.
Oh, I think there's a
Can you hear
network
me?
issue. Yeah, can hear you. If you're on your Wi-Fi, yeah, there you are. You're back. But your sound seems to have gone. So say something. No sound. Disconnect the Wi-Fi. Ah, she's left again. Okay, guys, she'll be back. I think with COVID has come the cyclone, has come so many other issues. And she's back, and we're waiting to go back live with her. Yeah,
Back. Oh, I'm sorry, everybody. This must be so frustrating.
no worries, you're back. So, so
Okay.
essentially, you're saying it's a tough time, and like there's some way for everyone to give back. Okay, so just sort of continuing that thread, I have a question here from Naam to Suna Hi Hoga. I really want to impact the world and give back to society. What would be a good starting point for someone like me? So this is like literally like if you think about like the retail sector, right? At the retail sector level, how can people get involved?
I mean, I think the first thing is really figure out what you care about the most, right? And what are you passionate about and where do you want to make a difference, and start learning about it and going to find organizations that, and there's tons of us that can help you navigate. The sector's really become richer, right? Where you can learn, you can go, we can tell you where to go, and get involved. And so, I mean, a lot of it has to do with time. So if you can even
Hmm.
give time, money, you can stay a bit focused. I think you should just get started in some way. You know, it was
Okay.
funny when we
So,
first
so
started and we were raising money. I remember this philanthropist saying actually writing a check is like a muscle that you have to just kind of build. I think getting involved in the sector requires a certain temperament, and just getting started is a great way.
Okay, so you build that muscle, and then hopefully muscle memory will ensure that that habit becomes sort of ingrained for the rest of your lives. But just tell me practically, like, so, okay, you let's say I identify a sector, say I want to be in education. Can I actually go to the Dasra website and say volunteer education, fill in my details, and then someone's going to contact me and say, okay, here's an opportunity we have for you? Is that how it
So
works?
no, it's not. So we haven't positioned ourselves to just be able to connect volunteers, but there's an organization called I Volunteer who will connect you to volunteer programs. But like we can help you find organizations you want to be able to support or learn about. But I think the first step is find something close to you, find something that you can spend time. And there's a lot of different organizations on websites and internet. I mean, we can guide as well. I think the challenge isn't about. Maybe some people feel the challenge is where to go, but it's quite easy. You just have to actually make it a priority and make it kind of part of your life. Just like you go to the gym and you exercise. I mean, figure out how you're gonna back
How are you
and be part
gonna
of something.
give back?
I mean,
Okay.
in education, there's nothing like not being, I mean, you can mentor children so easily. And right now, in a time of where there's a real challenge with teachers, you know that 50% of children in school are first time learners in our country. The parents are not educating. So they need all of us there to be role models. They need us to help them through school. And what does that mean? So there's lots
Sure.
to be done.
Okay. All right. So you're saying find an opportunity, find an organization that does it, and then just sort of touch base and go for it. Okay. Question here, considering your model from Rajiv Podar, who says, have you faced difficulty when dealing with local corporations or government bearers asking you for a cut to give you permission to do the work you do? Has that ever happened, like with the government intervening? And how do you deal with the same? Then he
I
says we
mean, I
deal
think
with this a lot. So,
I don't think we've dealt with it a lot. I mean, we've ended up working more with IAS officers to some extent, and there's a whole challenge of them turning around. But I would lie if I were to say that we never encountered it in our 21 years. I think it's to be black and white. I mean, if that ever is something that's asked of us, you say no, and you kind of move on. There's no such thing, at least in our minds, of a gray area. But I wouldn't say that it is a constant challenge in the sector. I actually think it's not a majority of the challenge, for sure.
Okay, it's not like one of your big challenges, but you've encountered it in some capacity.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll take a question here from Uf Mirchi, who says, according to you, what are the key social problems in India? So yeah, maybe like top 3 issues that you feel like really need like sort of priority sort of focus.
I mean, I would say probably access to high quality education. I would say access to health are two very basic things. And I'd probably go out there to say that actually child marriage is a big problem. I mean, our girls get married very early, and because they get married early, they have children early, and they get pulled out of school early. And then that causes this vicious cycle where you have young mothers who can't support the family either with healthy children or with, a livelihood to be able to support the family, or they live in very difficult families. But and so that's sort of one side of what we see. A lot of our challenges are, if you invest in women and girls, you'll move the needle on all of the sustainable goals. But the country also has broken government systems, right? I mean, we saw it with COVID, and you'll see more and more with education. And our challenge is, even if you are getting education, so and it's not about, are you learning, and are you learning to then be able to be employable and have a job, right? That link is what we have to make much tighter in our country, because we are in that demographic dividend, right? We will have a huge population that need to be in a workforce for themselves and for the country. And so education for the sole purpose of education is not what I mean, but I think that linking to clear learning,
Skill.
right?
Yeah. Skill-based education leading to jobs, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why for a few of us where we do have access to education, it's about rounding out that experience that's becoming more and more valuable because of the kinds of workplaces and jobs that exist, right? It's not just about checking the box, did I, do well in math anymore? It's
sure.
Like a whole lot more is expected
it's
of
a
us
whole
as we enter. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Great. Okay. That was very helpful. And there's a question here from Kish Kinda Trust, which says, hello, this is very insightful. How can nonprofits reach you? So do you have is there a selection process that you put nonprofits through? Do they sort of apply to be a Dasra, fundee? Like how does that whole process work? And on average, how long do you support an organization for?
So we have a mixed number of years, I suppose, that we support orgs. But the easiest way to enter into the Dasra family, I suppose, is through our leadership program, where we have a whole cohort of organizations that we actually partnered when we first started this with Harvard Business School, where I was like, the kind of education, Vibha, that you and I had, imagine if we could bring that kind of content and process and learning to the nonprofit sector. So we started a leadership development program. So folks can apply to it. Just come to our website and apply to that. And you can drop me an email too, and I'll figure out if there's a way to.
No, so I'm asking about the NGO side. Like, so how do you for the NGOs? Okay.
Yeah, for the NGO leadership, we have a program. That's a much wider net with whom we can we support. But yeah, otherwise it comes through I guess the select us.
There is a selection process.
Takes question there.
Oh, we'll take that question as well. So you're saying there is a selection process to these NGOs?
I mean, sort of, yes, but you have to come through our research. So usually we'll do landscaping, and while we landscape sectors to try to inform, funders where they could give and what kind of models have real potential to scale. In that process, these organizations will come through. But yeah,
so you may identify the organizations and then sort of you might approach them yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Or otherwise people can reach out to you on your website and say, okay, I run this sort of organization and would you be willing to fund? Okay.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
No,
harder that way, but yeah.
it's harder that way. Okay, fine. And on the donor side, how does that work? How do donors find you? How do you find the donors? What is that search process like?
So
Oh,
it's much more. Oh no, is
there. Okay, we can hear you. So let's go on. Yeah. Oh, the hearing just went off. The audio went off. No. Would you be able to share the email ID? I think you just go to their website, Kish Kind of Trust, and probably you just reference the fact that you heard her on the show, and so she knows. Okay, you're back. Dasra India is back. You can't hear me either, Sabahat. We're waiting for her to come back. Yeah,
yeah.
you're back.
Yeah, just an email at info@Dasra, and if you can write to me too. I'll figure it out.
Okay, great. All right, gonna pick up a question here from Vamsi, who says, what role can technology play with access to education being driven through edtech firms? And how do we ensure that there is a level playing field in terms of quality access to education for all? So the role
I mean,
of tech, yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a great question. I think that we might be. I think the ed tech phenomena in our country does serve, and we were talking about this earlier, right? It serves a certain group of us. Does
Right.
it serve the majority who don't have access to quality education? No. I mean, a third of our kids don't have access to a device.
To
A third,
devices,
which means,
exactly.
yeah. So it doesn't solve for the most vulnerable, right? It doesn't solve for kids who are potentially first-time learners, but it does become an enabler for us where we're already suffering from very low learning outcomes in government schools. So I think the pairing up of technology with teacher, with assistant teacher at a unit of a school level, I do think that there is real opportunity for that. But right now, I mean, our ed tech boom is all helping people do better on online exams and things like that.
Yeah.
So it
Right.
does need to move into, I mean, I think the real tech revolution is where it's got impact on learning outcomes is less about, am I holding the device, but it's the connection of all the data that happens and how that aggregates, and then that device plays back to be able to customize how each of us learn. I think there's really great opportunities for us to leapfrog to that. But I mean, we need a lot of the backbone, the back infrastructure and platforms for that. So I think there's a role, but it's not direct to consumer. It's probably to a platform of sorts. For the hundreds of millions of kids who need access to quality education, which is probably not everybody who's done.
Okay.
But we have to solve for enabling and being inclusive.
Okay, so you're saying currently the edtech platforms are largely servicing sort of middle to higher income families, and at the grassroots levels, you're not really seeing the edtech companies have any significant impact.
I mean, not yet. I mean, they are. I would not say it's zero, but is it really driving to provide learning outcomes for children? No. I mean, there's a whole lot of issues around that. Yeah.
Okay. And since you've used the word quality education a few times, I have someone here called Fly Higher India who says, how do you even define high quality education? So Neera, how do you define high quality education?
I mean, I would say can education fulfill an individual's aspirations, at the highest level? And then within that, can you peel that back to say, do I have learning and critical thinking skills that then lead to, jobs? And am I employable? And am I living up to my dreams and my aspirations? I think if those things connect, that is quality education. Now, is that a lot to ask of an education institute? Probably. So it takes a lot, right, to get all the way there.
Okay, so I'm hearing two big things. One is this education enabling me to meet my aspirations? And is this education also sort of a means to a finite end, which is a job? And if you meet that criteria, then at least you sort of have some level of
But
quality
Vibha,
education.
I mean, I would say that there's a third level to take it to aspiration, right? It's not
Sure.
just about a job. I would encourage everybody live up to an aspiration that's more than just having a job, because that's what we
Sure.
need to kind of change. So I would push ourselves to say it's job to achieve an aspiration ultimately to make a difference, I think.
Sure. Okay. Okay, it's a much longer conversation, and I want to have that conversation with you at some point, because I really feel like depending on where you stand in the pyramid, you know what that aspiration is. It's so relevant, right? And it's so relative to where you are already. You know, aspiration is always you build off of where you are currently. So, I mean, we will have this conversation at some point. I want to pick up a few more questions here. I have a question from Ayman, who says, it feels as if the problems in India don't have an end in sight. What keeps you motivated day to day?
That's a great question. Yeah, it feels like a drop in the ocean, but it's really those, you know, that one leader, the one organization, or, you know, the fact that you're making even the smallest difference, even to your team. I think it's those little things that add up that ultimately you feel like, oh, okay, maybe you helped in some way. But I do think it's reminding yourself and going out to see the kind of work that we're supporting to really stay motivated, because otherwise it could feel like a desk job. But when you can see the difference that, you know, whatever little we have on direct lives of the most vulnerable, I think, and you see how they live and how motivated they are and how they continue with a sense of optimism, and I think that's what keeps me going. It's empathy, but it's also recognizing our privilege in some ways, and how do you leverage that for others. And I don't mean privilege from a place of wealth. I mean, think about how comfortable we are, and is there a way to think about giving some of that up so that others can have more? I think it's something we do need to think about as a society, more so than ever. I think COVID has brought this to light.
Okay, that's actually very well phrased. Privileged not just financially, but in so many other ways. Emotionally privileged. I mean, there's tons of privilege. Okay, let's take Vivek's question, since he's a special guest here today. So, I mean, you can answer it the way you want to answer it, but essentially the question is, how has it been working with your husband? So, for all of you like who don't know, Neera co-founded Dasra with her husband Deval. So, what is it like co-founding an organization with your partner, and you know, what are some of the challenges you guys face? How did you divide and conquer? Are you sort of joint decision making? How are you guys mapping this whole journey?
We probably should do a better job of mapping it. I must admit, it has a super highs and it has a super lows. But it's you know, a privilege to have a companion to share something that you're trying to build together. Sure. But I think with that comes a tremendous amount of frustration, but also I think compromise and recognize. It sounds like a relationship, but it is kind of like that, even in a working way, is to compromise, right? On okay, it's give and get, even for how we've ended up building Dasra. I think extending the Dasra family to include others as we've grown has actually helped decrease the tension that can happen when you're a husband-wife. I think recognizing it's all intertwined. I think one of our biggest challenge was we were growing the family at the same time that we were growing Dasra. And I couldn't say more than probably the most important decision, at least in a woman's life, is who your partner or spouse is. And to be able to have someone that supports you is phenomenal for any career, whether you want to work together or not. Right.
Okay, and
so
you definitely
actually
we need more supporting men. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, and you definitely lucked out on that front as well. So another privilege in your feather of in your cap of full of feathers already. Another question here from Photo Chromatography, who says, what is the one thing you need the most help with? So as you run this organization, and if you had this magic wand and you say, okay, Jeannie, I want this one thing, what would that one thing be?
Oh, to keep people motivated and keep them at Dasra. I wish I could keep everybody that came to work for us. If I think of our alumni, we're about 350 people strong, and every person, for whatever reason, feels like a little part of Dasra goes out, and I wish we could hold everyone and be a stronger family together. But managing people, keeping people motivated, helping them grow, build careers in the sector. I mean, that I wish that was a wand.
Okay. So your team, your family, you'd want to keep your family cohesive and together and sort of stay for the longer term. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very that's more personal, individual. But if I could really like wave a wand, I would try and wave a wand around more inclusiveness, greater access, equities that we have surfaced. You know, if you could have, all in equity and have a transformed India where everybody thrives with dignity and equity, that's our mission. I would want our mission to come true, right, with a wand.
I don't think I have any more questions beyond that, Neera. I think we should end on that note. A world of equality and a flat world with no inequity at all. I think that's a fine closing statement for this conversation. And I truly hope that dream of yours comes true, because it's so beautifully phrased. It's giving me goosebumps what you just said, and I really would like to close on that note. So thank you so much, Neera. This conversation has been extremely inspiring. Your journey, of course, truly inspiring for many of us. I'm going to re-listen to this entire conversation actually, so I can absorb some of the nuggets that you shared. You share them very in your true style of being super casual, humble, very relatable. But there was lots of wisdom in this conversation. And thanks once again. Truly an experience to have you on the show. Thank you so much, and fantastic work.
Thank you.